Here we are, Punting Melbourne Style, back for part 2, and we're going to talk a bit of footy.
We've got the great Mickey McGuane here. So, footy finals, AFL start this week.
Can't wait for it, actually.
Yeah, exciting.
Oh, 4 great games.
4 great, yeah. I thought,
we have got a punting show. What's the betting, Mick?
Well, here we go, I've got the betting here.
You got the betting?
Yeah, several here. We've got a great Mick here, so...
I've jumped the gun, sorry.
We'll get right into it. Bombers and West Coast is the first game. $1.22 West Coast, about $4.50, $4.60 to Bombers. That's the Bombers probably... They beat them over there recently, didn't they?
No,
they beat 3-0. So they beat 3-0
over there. But West Coast were really disappointing against Hawthorn last week. I just reckon
that's right, Hawks.
The effort required to finish in the top 4. I reckon they'll be stung by that loss. Yo, Shuey, Gaff, these guys through the middle of the ground really have to get to work. They're not a real good clearance team. They're not a real good post-clearance team to win the contested ball at ground level. Call it loose ball hunt. Certainly they'll get to work. They weren't that last year, but in their finals they turned around to be a positive. Okay. So they are capable.
Yeah.
I think this is where the game will be won and lost through the middle of the ground. If they get good territory, I think Darling, Kennedy, even though Darling will probably get Ambrose, and you'd think Hurley will start on Kennedy, and Kennedy's not in great form.
No, but Darling's been terrific.
They've clearly got the capabilities to kick a winning score. I think the West Coast Eagles probably around the $1.20 mark.
Right.
They're fairly obvious.
So have they all year played as well as they did in the finals last year?
No.
Have they got that up their sleeve, or is it just too hard?
Well, it's a bit like the hunger. You've tasted the success from the previous year, and I lived it in 90 when we beat Essendon in the flag, and 91 we just didn't have the same probably appetite to go back to back, and it's hard to do. And you've got to get everything right. I think Nick Nat Nui, and we don't know the teams yet, but you'd think if he's right, they've got to roll him out. This is a do or die final. They can't wait till next week if they get beat, for example. So I think they'll roll him out, and he'll give them an enormous amount of advantage around stoppage. He'll complement Hickey. That means probably Waterman or Allen will have to be left out of the team because they can't go with them all. They'll be too tall. And then they've got the weapons in their front half. Their fleet-of-foot players in Ryan and Rioli. Even Cripps can hit the scoreboard. So I think they've got most bases covered. They're hard to penetrate. McGovern, Barras, who's been down, but I think in a final, Hearn's a question mark whether he plays as captain. He's got some leg issues, but they're confident he probably will play. They did some match simulation. I spoke to a bloke who went and watched it last Friday, and Hearn didn't partake in that.
Right.
Yeah. Daniel Pratt, one of the line coaches, was involved in playing the half-back role. So they left him out. A couple of players they could have played Waffle, they didn't. Jared Cameron, for example, does he come in and replace Petruccelli? Maybe go to a defensive forward on one Assad or McKenna, because they're two players that give them a lot of bounce and energy out of half-back, and that's what they've got to try to control. That slingshot footy, coming back through the corridor, score out the back. That's one thing the Bombers.
So that game against Hawthorn, they had a lot to play for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the motivation would have been there. So what happens?
Well, they were off by 5% pots, just in terms of
that's all it takes.
That's all it takes
so
at that level.
The motivation's not enough, is it?
No.
You've also got to have the right attitude to go with the motivation.
You've got to have great energy to provide great effort.
Yep.
And once you get your effort right, then your fundamentals must stand up. Your ball use, your decision making.
So as a coach, can you sense that in the players that they're just not got their minds in the right
not
place?
too early in the game, I suppose.
I'm yet to see it pre-game.
Yeah, right.
You try to tick off on your planning. That's why your sports science people have got huge contracts in AFL land now. They're very important, but they must work with the footy side of things, and you need good overlay, of course, but how much do you go footy-wise as opposed to fitness-wise or recovery-wise?
Yeah.
So you've got to get that balance right, and that's the week-to-week challenge. And the other layer that they have to contend with, they're travelling every second week.
Yeah.
So they've got to take that into account to how they freshen their
It's
players
probably
up.
like
But this 2-week break, I think, will suit them.
Look, we're on talking about the racetracks. I mean, everyone that just watches it thinks, the win was huge, or this was huge, and it's a massive impact. It's never like that. It's when I walk tracks, and the difference between a 3 and a 5 is much less than people think, and the whole setup is quite fragile, and the differences are subtle. And over a race of 1,600 metres, you're looking to get an advantage of a length, and little things add up.
Yeah.
They only need to be
a portion of a second.
It's just fraction things. I think maybe with football the whole setup's like that too. It's all
absolutely.
subtle things, and it's
the subtle
fragile.
nature for you, Potts, watching it Thursday night, being a racing person first, but lover of sport second, and if you watch AFL footy, if you're watching outside the ball and you're watching when West Coast have it, you'll see players in front of the ball be very selfless, and they'll be running to get chalk on their feet.
Yeah.
That opens up the ground, makes the ground big and long.
Yeah.
Now, if they can get their kick mark going, and they want 100 marks, if they get to 100 marks, they've won 9 out of 10 games this year. Their magical figure last year was 90.
Right.
They hardly lost when they got to 90 marks.
Yeah.
So they want to control the tempo of the game by accumulating, marking the ball. Conversely, the contrast is, as much as Essendon want to get chalk on their feet, their mode of ball movement will be slingshot. Get it back through 45s, we call it, coming off half back through 45s, through the corridor, and get it into the forward line as quick as you possibly can. So the defensive structure you'll see that West Coast Eagles will adopt, if they go into their forward line, Essendon turn it over, you'll see them squeeze the ground, make it a half ground. They'll have good corridor coverage, they'll have 45 coverage, so it stifles the Essendon ball movement down. Once Essendon have to go slow, that's when they struggle, because they haven't got the tall bailout options down the line. As much as McKernan's competitive, Brown's a lead up forward, he's not a Jonathan Brown who can take a pack mark, and that's where they can turn it over at halfway, and that's when they become vulnerable going back into their own 450 end.
So West Coast about fifth pick, $9 from the flag. You think that's right? They're not.
Oh, they're still a realistic chance. At their very best, they're more than capable. You know, if Nick Naitanui comes back and stands up, he's just an X factor that other clubs have not got. He could be the difference between they're advancing or they're not. If he gets through this game at 60% probably game time, that's all they'll need with him, because he'll complement Hickey pretty well, and they'll need Hickey just in case he does break down. That's a dilemma they've got at the selection table too, because I think in an ideal world they wouldn't play both. They'd play Nick Naitanui if he was 100% right, and then they'd use Oscar Allen or a Waterman to complement Darling and also Kennedy in that part of the ground.
All right, Mag, your mob, the Maggies.
Yep, can't wait for it.
Can't wait versus Geelong.
Yeah, this is going to be an intriguing game of footy.
175 Geelong are favourites, 215.
Yeah, I think Collingwood represents some value, and I'm trying to eliminate bias, of course.
Yep.
And I try to really concentrate on that facet when I'm doing reporting on Collingwood games, because you can only end up with egg on your face either way. But I just think the dynamic forward line that Collingwood will have, I'm pretty sure they'll play Stevenson.
Right.
They'll bring DeGoey back, who's a star, who's a game changer, very Dacos-like in our day. They'll bring Sidebottom back with his problem he had with his testicle, and they'll bring Darcy Moore in.
I can't stop smiling when as soon as you say Sidebottom, I think it's funny.
Yeah.
Because it's funny if it happens to anyone else but yourself, I think.
He did a bit of a gold sack, didn't he? He's now retired, but
it's the second one for the year, wasn't it? Someone else did one as well.
It was a North player, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right, Scotty Thompson or someone.
Yeah, that's right. But they're four really big inclusions. Darcy Moore, if he had played in West Coast, the grand final against the Eagles last year, there's an argument that would have won because height became a factor late in the game. So he's critical. So those four inclusions make Collingwood completely different. They'll make some hard calls in front of the ball. Does Josh Thomas survive? Does Callum Brown survive? Varco, does he survive? Behind the ball, now that Moore comes back in, Roughhead goes back to Tom Hawkins, does Mangan go out? So they've got some decisions that they won't make probably till today or tomorrow. They'll train tomorrow, then they'll finalise their team. Players by then would have known what their situation was. So I think because of that dynamism they've got in front of the ball, they can cause concern, providing the Collingwood play quick. They've played a short kicking style recently over the last month of footy, which is control, and it's more a kick mark game. But you can't be patient against the Geelong defence. Their back six are as good as anyone. Blick Sarves will probably go back and be an anchor. Stanley will go to Grundy in the middle of the ground and probably be the athletic ruckman against him to nullify his influence and try to run off him as much as he can. So they won't probably need Roughhead forward to be that relief ruckman, because Grundy will probably do 90% of it. The big Tommy Hawkins could be the difference. Him playing against a Magnan or a Scharenberg or a Moore for that matter, I just think he's too big, too robust, too strong. Roughhead goes back where he played mostly this year. He had to go forward because of the Mason Cox injury, but I think they've got the versatility now in front of the ball. My check with probably 4 or 5 others who are electrifying. Get Roughhead back to solidify that defence and shore it up. Play on Hawkins. Radagale is the other one that can probably play tall in that part of the ground. But I don't think that's their concern. It's their fleet of foot players at ground level that could cause concern for Collingwood's back end. Ablett, Myers, Dalehouse, these types of boys are unbelievable at ground level. Their 450 retention at ground ball hunt to win it, to manufacture, score assists or kick goals themselves is the best in the competition.
So for the first half of the year, like Geelong were looking almost untouchable.
They were.
Whether it's just home and away, and they're just dominant.
The other side's
So since they've been a bit. So what's been the key to that vulnerability since the?
They went away from what I thought their trademark was, and it was contested ball. They're the best contested ball winning team in the competition when they play that way.
So is that just an attitude thing?
That's an attitudinal thing. That's a work rate thing. That's an effort thing. But when they play that, they don't lose. They've won 16 contested ball differentials through the year, and they've won every game.
Yeah.
They've lost six contested ball differentials, and they've lost every game. So that doesn't paint a picture to the players to say, let's get to work and let's compete, whether it be in a contest, free kick, or there's a 50-50 footy, go get your head over the hole. That's what you want.
In the middle of the board with Chris Scott, you think, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, it will be. And let's face it, one thing that does go up in finals, where the stakes are higher, is contested ball numbers. One thing that goes down is uncontested ball numbers, because it's life and death in footy language. It's serious footy. Its stakes are high, 90,000 of watching.
The stakes are high in that game, aren't they?
Well,
so I'm reading what you're saying. I'm thinking it's going to be on for young and old from the first bounce.
And there's been a bit of byplay too. Chris Scott says we deserve the home final. Scotty Pendlebury throws out his 300th game. I'm glad we don't have to travel down there to play me 300th. Glad it's the MCG. So there's a bit of byplay that's happening off the ground, which is good for the game and good for discussion.
Not much between them in the premiership betting either, so there's about that margin in the game on the weekend, so it'll be bloody interesting.
The winner will firm out of this game.
Yeah, sure. Next we've got the Doggies. The Doggies up against GWS. How good the Doggies?
They're airborne. They're playing an exciting round. Over the last month of footy, they're averaging 116
enormous
goals. This time last year, we were saying where their goals come from.
They're like a
turn around?
Incredible.
Like a horse that's gone from like a maiden or a benchmark 64.
Rapid improvement. He's just bounced through the grades.
They're heading for a Group 1 fast.
Had that month or 6 weeks of just gone boom, boom, boom.
And it's based on their midfield group, McRae, Montepelli, who's probably one of the best 3 or 4 players in the competition. With Liberatore's injury, in comes Dunkley, who's certainly playing that role as an inside mid, accumulating footy. They got good cover on the outside. Johannesson gives them a bit of launch. Hunter's a very good player who runs up and down the ground, top end speed but good endurance. So he gets back to cover, exit option on the way out, so he kickstarts their offence and accumulates. And in front of the ball, they've got a young player called Norton. Who's a star. Yeah, absolute star. He's just on 19, 20 years of age. He's a contested mark freak. The ball players love kicking it into him because they trust him in terms of his competition. If he doesn't mark it, he doesn't get outmarked. So that invites their ground level players to get front and square, to manufacture some hard goals or get a free kick if you're prepared to put your head in the hole. So they're doing a lot right, the Doggies. I just keep going back to that final in 16 when they won the flag.
Up there.
It was just an amazing game of footy. Great to watch. That would be stinging in the GWS's tails. Here's a chance for retribution, even though it's a long time ago. Because that year, a lot of people were saying GWS had the capabilities of advancing, and it was the Bulldogs that stopped their run. Are they playing to the level that's required, GWS? That's the question mark. One thing I think they can get an advantage against the Doggies is their forwards versus the Doggies defenders, and I'm talking purely on height and inches. They just look undermanned down back in terms of height. Cameron, Finlayson,
they can stretch them.
Could really stretch them with quick ball 1v1. The inches of Cameron, Finlayson, Himmelberg can do some damage. Now we're going to be talking about Cordy. Gee, he was undermanned, wasn't he? That's why Cameron kicked 5. Oh hell. Finlayson versus Easton Wood, the captain. As much as he tries to sag off to help a 2v1 in the air, sometimes they've got to get good separation, good isolation, put them in those 1v1 vulnerabilities, and we might find out that they aren't that good one-on-one, and also they can be exposed with height. So I think GWS will try to penetrate their forward line into their forward line as quick as possible. We know they're a very good stoppage team. They're elite. We know that Western Bulldogs aren't good at defending a good stoppage team. So that's where the game could become strong. The other aspect that GWS would have been training for and watching them over the last month, if they don't get their defensive 50 transition to their forward line right, because the Bulldogs are such a good turnover team, they'll get scored against. There's only been an opportunity in the last month in total to go from D50 to forward 50 entry and scoring. They've only scored 23 points. So it's only 1 goal per game. That's ridiculously low. So they can't survive on that. Everyone tells me they're a skillful team. They're a good ball movement team, but they're not that.
That tells you in the stats.
So in terms of their facet of the game, they've got to work on their defensive transition. Not that they want to win that way, because they don't. They've got to try to get the ball from territory stoppage into their forward 50, and that's when they might be able to manufacture.
That's what intriguing there, Mick. Not understanding all the really technical aspects that you're into there. It's just the mental aspect of this game. GWS have always been this young, super talented, highly touted team, and now they come into a final, and all of a sudden it's just flipped on its head, where the Bulldogs are this all of a sudden this young, super talented, touted team, and the GWS some players that are getting some experience, but their backs right against the wall. Is there any mental? Is there an edge to be gained out of the mental attitude going into this game for either side?
Oh, absolutely. And the mental side of the game is important in any sport, I think. You know, you get a jockey who's winning races, he just believes that he's in good form, so he rides the wave, he sees the race unfold. There's no different to a game of footy. You think that you're running the right patterns, you get on the end of one, you run to the right patterns to get a ground ball, you run the right patterns to get a handball receive or intercept a mark. You just believe in what you've been doing, and that's where the Bulldogs are in good form at the moment.
Momentum,
they'll
confidence.
be feeling really good about themselves.
Won't this say a lot about the GWS as a club? Like, if they can't find something in this game, if they put up the white flag and don't fight it down to the right to the death,
they probably will. You'd think though, it's up there, and they've got to.
They've got to, haven't they?
Well, they've got to.
They've got to be in this game to the final kick.
There's no doubt about that, and there's a lot of pressure on Leon Cameron. I admire Leon Cameron as a person. Played a lot of footy against him, but the reality is he's had arguably a very, very good list to win finals, but also launch a grand final berth. And they've failed at times, and sometimes I reckon, based on his decisions or the match committee have made, they've gone too tall in their forward line. Everyone in the scoring profile says in footy today, you've got to try to get the ball in, but if you don't win it, you've got to keep it in.
Yeah.
They leak so many easy exits. You get so many players retreating before anticipation, and there just doesn't appear to be a lot of trust around the fall of the ball in your forward line. So blokes like Daniels and Toby Green, they've got to understand that Cameron, Finlayson, Hibble, they're not going to mark everything. But when the ball gets to ground level, you've got to get in and get first access to the ground ball, not dissimilar to what Geelong are very good at. And if they do that well, they'll be able to score. But also if they are there and they just get pinpointed by that moment in time to win that loose ball, they're there to put pressure on the opposition to create a high ball exit. That's when Heath-Shaw and all their defenders, Phil Davis and these blokes must come up the ground and really squeeze the ground aggressively. The old one will get out the back. You can cop that. So that's when you've got to weigh up how many get out the back as opposed to how many we keep in. Because if you keep getting repeats, eventually the damn wall breaks. And that's where they've got to really concentrate on doing well.
Is it possible to put a figure on what it's worth that all the passion around a club like Collingwood or Richmond, and they get... Just if they play GWS in a preliminary final at the MCG, 90,000 Collingwood supporters and a handful of GWS or same with Richmond, how much is that worth?
We know as a player, Potts, and I loved my time at Collingwood and understood that wherever we went, there was always great voice, great support, but they don't win you a game of footy.
Yeah, right.
It's an intangible that's hard to measure.
Yeah.
But you do feed off it.
Yeah.
You hear the noise, you hear the volume of noise. But it's amazing how you can distance yourself from that noise. All that becomes a distant memory post-game and post-your-career.
I've always wondered about that, what it feels like when you're on the ground as opposed to...
Well, I suppose it'd be not dissimilar to asking a jockey of a Melbourne Cup.
Yeah.
You hear 100,000 at Flemington, but for that 3 minutes of time, you're in the zone. For our 2 hours of footy, you're in the zone.
We'll ask you that question, Maurice, when you...
so it's just not dissimilar, I would have thought, in the view that you're there to concentrate, you're applying your craft, you're applying your concentration, you're applying your role. You know, you're going to say, well, okay, today you've got to play on Marcus Bontempelli, Matt de Boer. I'm tipping Matt de Boer's not going to be worried about the 30,000 people in the crowd. And the
distractions,
noise. He's going to be purely concentrating on nullifying one of the brilliant players of the competition to bring him back to the team for what he needs to do.
All right, the final game for the first round is another great clash. Brisbane Lions, another great up-and-coming side, like the Doggies and Richmond, who are now the premiership favourites.
How many Richmond supporters will travel?
A lot.
A lot?
A lot. It was a sellout in 2 hours, Potts, this game.
Is that right? Right.
3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago.
What's the game?
This wouldn't have happened. Yeah, it'll get to 40. I think it's 38 capacity.
Yep.
So, good on them. They've been the story of the year. I didn't have them in the top 8. I didn't foresee this transformation in a team this quickly. Terrific to see them.
Rand's going down early too. Rewald went down there. Remember
Rewald,
I was teasing on the Tigers. Mark Rover, the boy, Tiggy train off the cliff, into the cliff.
I remember saying to Mark and Madeline today, you'll never get better odds about the Tigers than right now. Because it was just all going to shit, wasn't it?
Well, they weren't playing good footy either, and they had some of their best personnel, and I didn't think that at that time they'd make the 8, and they travelled. And they got a win under their belt and just manufactured a lot of belief with the younger kids they brought in to do that role and get the job done that night. But in this game, Brisbane being 225, I think that represents great value. They're 10-1 at the Gabatoir.
Yeah.
They believe in their system up there. I reckon the learnings out of round 23 is not too far away to get better at.
Nice and fresh.
They're nice and fresh in their mind. Their stoppage game was great. Their contested ball game was good. Their territory was great. But what wasn't good was their structure around stoppage and their ball use. They become too methodical at coming out of defence, play too safe. Now, if you play with too much width, you might get a stoppage, which goes back to your strength. That's okay. But once you know over a period of a quarter or a half or 3 quarters that that's not penetrating the defensive area, for Richmond, Voston, Grimes, Basher Hurley, Broad, these types of boys who are intercepting the ball, you've got to channel the ball through different areas to open up that forward half. It is so easy to go there, opposition squeeze that ground, knowing full well there's only probably one avenue to goal. And that's what you can't afford to do against the Tigers. And the other thing I said about structure, in the view that if Brisbane are going that way, their onside winger will stand generally this side of the pack. What happens in that case, the Richmond winger generally stands that side of their pack. But what Richmond do more so better than anybody, that person doesn't stay around the stoppage. He pushes back 40 metres. So all of a sudden, that gives Grimes the opportunity to peel off his opponent and go to the goalkeeper role. So straight away, Richmond back their trust around the ball. If the opposition win it, they have an extra around the footy. But if you bomb it in, guess what happens? You kick into an outnumber. They win it back, that's when they start their counter-attack. That's when they go explode.
I get annoyed watching them, because when you're watching on TV, you can't really see the whole field. But it always feels to me like Richmond have got 2 extra players on the field.
Well, chaos.
The chaos ball is what they want. And this is the reason why Brisbane, with Robinson or McCluggage, who will play on those wings role, instead of starting here, they will roll around in front of the ball. And they will say, if you want to go back, whoever's playing on wing for Richmond, I'm going back with you to equalise numbers. Because if we win it here, you can go out the front of the stoppage, but we'll back our back 6. But if we win it, we're coming out the front of stoppage, and we're not kicking to 1v1s like last week. They got smashed in ground ball hunt. They were minus 17 forward 50. That's laughable.
Okay.
That just can't survive a final. And they also got beaten in too many 1v1s. So Hipwood, McStay, these boys, McInerney plays at the goal square, even Cameron 1v1, they've got to fight the fight. But they'll be able to fight the fight much better when it's not competing against 2 blokes in the air.
I'm going to ask a racing question here, Mick, about an AFL game, so it might be a completely stupid question. But they've had a bit of a good run with the weather, Richmond. They've got a number of wet tracks in a row. Are they a wet tracker going on to a dry track?
Well, that question was posed to Damien Hardwick earlier this week. It's not a stupid question at all. They've had a great record in the wet. But he believes, and I think I believe, because of their fleet of foot, their mosquito fleet, they're much better on the dry.
Right, okay.
So that won't hold them.
I've had a number of games where they've sort of been close, then it's rained, and Richmond are just 5 goals in front, within 10 minutes.
And is that the West Coast Eagles game? When West Coast
against the D's,
yeah, that's what they looked at. I watched the first half of that.
Yeah.
West Coast looked back on premiership material then.
The West Coast?
Yeah.
There was another game too. When they... I can't remember, but there was a game I was watching that was...
I can't remember the other one. But no, it's a good question because it's going to be hot up there. It's going to be a night
Did it
game.
rain when they played Brisbane? That game was close, wasn't it? Oh, I can't remember. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. But it's going to be a great game of footy.
Yeah.
Both sides will believe they can enter this game and win.
So if Brisbane happen to win that game, that means they get a preliminary home final.
Yes, absolutely. It does. Absolutely. There's a lot of stuff.
If they happen to win that game there, they have to be considered a genuine premiership champion.
No question.
Which is extraordinary, isn't it?
$7 they are.
And that's the reason why Fagan will be the coach of the year.
Well, I was going to just ask you a bit about Fagan. What are your thoughts on him? He's obviously, it's a great story.
I think he's a great manager. I've got a good connection with Dale Tapping, who was a Collingwood VFL coach. He was down at our club only 2 Thursdays before the Richmond game. And actually I got him to speak to our boys just in terms of the correlation between us being on top and Brisbane on top of the ladder. Where's the growth come from? What are you doing going to a finals campaign any different? The influence of Luke Hodge. Tell us about Zorko as a leader. So he covered all bases. It was a great insight for our younger players that don't get a chance to hear from that. And the basic message was to have faith in the way you play. You've got to this stage of the year based on how you played. There's no need to tinker or change. There'll be some subtle shifts that you have to do based on the opposition and the health of them and the health of your own team. But generally speaking, it's down to your brand. What stood up for most of the year is generally the reason why you finished on top of the
What must they have been at the start of the year?
Oh, I hate to think. Yeah, there would have been. Oh, to win the flag? Yeah, probably more.
And we'll get a quick Brownlow thought for you before we finish up, Mickey. Dangers 2-1, Bontempelli 4-1 with Lockie Neal, $5-6, Cripps 11, Grundy 15.
Yeah, well, Dangerfield's last month probably gives him a chance to be in the frame, but I didn't think he had the first half of the year that he probably has had previously. I've loved Lockie Neal's year. They're a winning team. They're a story of the year. Umpires are human. They gravitate to stories.
He's got to be the dominant player, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's been outstanding.
Sort of player.
He's always under their noses.
Yeah. Well, all these blokes under their noses. Bonham, Gully, Cripps, 5.
Well, with Neal, if you watch him closely, because he's so sharp with his hands, he gets it, gives it before a lot of people recognise it.
Yeah.
Does that put a dampener on him with the umpires' decisions? I've loved Cripps' year. Carlton got better when they sacked Bolton. Teague let the boys play, put some strength around the footy with Murphy going back in there, Ed Curnow going back in there. They were too light of frame to compete against AFL big bodies. You know, the young Walsh of the world was a great story, but Fisher, even Dow, a bit of O'Brien on the outside, they just couldn't compete with the bigger bodies, so they had to change that. And I'm glad they put players where they play their best footy, and there's no coincidence it can turn around quickly.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Murphy started getting his 30 again, impact the scoreboard. We saw Curnow go back and run with some of the opposition's best midfielders, but still accumulate the ball himself. And that allowed Cripps just to get to work. As much as the opposition are trying to bring him back because his first hand around stoppage, his first possession gives, kick-starts their offence.
I think everyone wants Carlton to be a bit competitive, but just not too competitive.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. But no, they're I think if Richmond, Essendon, Collingwood and Carlton are playing strong footy, Melbourne's alive and well. And you've got a Hawthorn who are very successful under a superstar coach. They've had their time.
They could do with a wooden spoon, couldn't they?
No.
We'll be back next year.
They'll be back.
I found Warple, mate. What are you? Warple and Mitchell.
Well, Mitchell will get back. I was talking to Barry Mitchell last week. He thinks Tommy will get back. I reckon Hawthorn should be in the race for Lockie Whitfield. If they're prepared to go to Cornelio, go to Whitfield, then they'll have their two best outside players in Scully and also Whitfield. Don't forget last 6 games that Wingard's played.
Yeah,
he was outstanding. He had a slow preparation, injured preparation. Wasn't the player that they thought they'd have, but now he's got a hunger for it to get back to where he should be. And I'd love to see him get another intercept defender, if you can use a name that I'd think it'd fit hand in glove with Hawthorn, to be Nick Haynes from GWS.
Okay.
That type of player, because he'd complement Sicily. For all he can be the lockdown defender. They'll get Impey back into that as a bit of run and carry. But they're not far away.
Back up there next year.
And also, I do like.
We're not going to have a flag. We've been a couple of years.
If the Hawks are in play this time next year, I'm not doing this show. You can just do it, Mick.
All right. Oh, that's fantastic, Mick. I hope all the viewers and the people who follow the show appreciate that. It was amazing insight, Mick.
No
Thanks for
worries,
coming on anytime, Mick.
Anytime.
We asked Mick, he's Australia, isn't he? It's fantastic. So,
no problem.
Great
Great
racing man as well. So, all right, Potts. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. We might have special guests in a couple of weeks.
You bet.
All right.
I hope you enjoyed that, punters. Cheers.
Good luck.